Good morning, this is the 10 point from the Wall Street Journal, your daily briefing for Sunday, August 2nd, 2026. I'm Emma Tucker, and today we're leading with the early missteps that continue to haunt the investigation into the kidnapping of Nancy Guthrie, mother of Today Show co-anchor Savannah Guthrie. Plus, the race to build an American alternative to cheap Chinese AI, and how helicopter parenting has migrated from the playground into the workplace, parents not just helping with resumes anymore, but calling hiring managers, applying for jobs on their adult children's behalf, and even lurking just off-screen during Zoom interviews. We'll get to all of that, but let's start in Tucson, Arizona, where our reporters have spent months retracing an investigation that began with a disappearance and has yielded few answers despite massive resources and months of searching. After Nancy Guthrie was kidnapped from her Arizona home, Journal reporters traveled to Tucson and reconstructed the investigation from its earliest hours. What they found is a case study in how bad calls, bad luck, and strained relations between county and federal authorities complicated the search almost immediately. Those early setbacks, the reporting reveals, shaped an investigation that has struggled to gain traction. The jurisdictional tensions between local and federal agencies weren't just bureaucratic friction, they meant lost time, duplicated efforts, and critical gaps in the initial response. Months later, the case remains largely unresolved, a reminder that in high-profile kidnappings, the first hours often determine the outcome, and when coordination fractures, the consequences can be irreversible. On the consumer front, cyclospora outbreaks, that parasitic illness linked to contaminated produce, are driving shoppers to farmers' markets in search of locally grown alternatives. The logic is straightforward: shorter supply chains, fewer handling points, and direct relationships with growers feel safer when industrial food systems keep failing. But the surge in demand is also reshaping local agriculture, pushing small farms to scale up fast, sometimes beyond their capacity. What started as a health-driven pivot is becoming an economic force, accelerating the farm-to-table movement not as a lifestyle choice but as a risk management strategy. In the legal arena, cuts to workers' compensation payouts are driving lawyers away from the field, making it harder for injured employees to challenge denied claims. It's a quiet crisis. As fees shrink and cases become less economically viable, attorneys who once specialized in workers' comp are exiting, leaving claimants without representation. The result is a system where the power imbalance between employers and injured workers grows wider, not because the law changed dramatically, but because the economics of advocacy collapsed. For a worker facing a denied claim, finding a lawyer willing to take the case is now half the battle. From the markets, James McIntosh writes that the latest pullback in AI-related stocks has barely dented the broader market. America's boom and bust stock market cycles, he argues, are becoming easier to shrug off, for now. The resilience is notable. In previous cycles, a sharp correction in a dominant sector would drag everything down. This time, the rest of the market has largely held, suggesting either genuine diversification or a dangerous complacency. McIntosh's 4 now carries the weight of history. Every cycle feels different until it doesn't. The question isn't whether the AI trade will face a reckoning, but whether the broader market's immunity is structural or just delayed. Now, the centerpiece of today's technology coverage, Silicon Valley is racing to build an American alternative to cheap AI from China. A new crop of startups is building open-weight AI models to compete with cheaper Chinese rivals such as DeepSeek and Qwen. These models, freely available, modifiable, and deployable without licensing fees, have upended the economics of AI development. Chinese labs have proven you don't need billion-dollar compute budgets to reach frontier performance. But here's the problem: many investors are reluctant to fund the American challengers. The race to challenge China is becoming as much a funding battle as a technology one. Venture capitalists, burned by the hype cycle and wary of open-weight models' monetization paths, are sitting on the sidelines. Meanwhile, Chinese models gain adoption, mindshare, and ecosystem momentum. The geopolitical stakes are clear. AI leadership is now framed as a national security imperative, but the capital markets haven't fully aligned with that narrative. Kate Clark and Sam Skechner explain why this gap between strategic urgency and investment appetite may be the real bottleneck. Shifting to the academy, Pamela Paul takes us inside a discipline in crisis. When she set out to report on tensions within sociology as a window into broader shifts in the social sciences, she began in true academic fashion: panels, conferences, papers. At a panel last year, she got a front-row seat to a discipline in the throes of a fractious and increasingly public breakdown. Her plan was to attend the American Sociological Association conference in August and document how these schisms were playing out at the field's largest annual gathering. But a week into her interviews, she heard about a pro-Palestine contingent's boycott of the conference, and the story suddenly became very hot. Since publication, she's been inundated with emails and poured through nearly 800 comments on the site. One from a former sociology major stood out. "I was drawn to sociology because I wanted to know more about how we humans organize ourselves. It's so central to everything we do. How can we do this better?" For non-academics, it's easy to dismiss sociology's woes as ivory tower navel-gazing. But Paul makes the case that sociology informs everything from workplace practices to public policy in poverty, housing, and education. If sociology has a serious people problem, it's our problem too. Now to Europe's southern border. Most of the tens of thousands of migrants who entered Spain's North African enclave of Ceuta have now left. But the dramatic surge has rattled Europe and ignited fears of a much broader immigration crisis. Ceuta, a Spanish territory on the Moroccan coast, became a pressure valve when Moroccan border controls appeared to relax, allowing mass crossings, many by swimming or scaling fences. The images were staggering, thousands arriving in a matter of days, overwhelming local resources. While most have since been returned or relocated, the political shockwaves persist. The episode exposed the fragility of Europe's externalization strategy, relying on North African partners to enforce its borders, and raised urgent questions about what happens when those partners decide to leverage migration as a political tool. Roberto Ferdman breaks down what drove the influx and what lies ahead for border policy in a continent where the migration debate is already reshaping governments. Looking at the week ahead, Monday brings the Major League Baseball trade deadline, always a frenzy of last-minute deals as contenders bolster rosters and sellers offload expiring contracts. Tuesday is packed, primary elections in a handful of states including Michigan, the Commerce Department's report on the U.S. trade balance, and a milestone. SpaceX posts its first earnings report as a publicly listed company. Wednesday, Ted Lasso returns on Apple TV for a fourth season, a cultural event in its own right. And Friday, the Labor Department releases the July jobs report, the month's most market-moving economic indicator, watched for signs of cooling or resilience in the labor market. The number of the day, 6,376. That's how many HOA-related foreclosure filings hit U.S. properties in the first quarter of this year, up nearly 40% from 2 years earlier. Money is getting tighter for homeowners associations, insurance costs, maintenance deferrals, rising assessments, and many are taking a harder line against residents who fall behind on dues. The foreclosure tool, once a last resort, is being deployed more aggressively. For homeowners, it's a double bind. Rising costs make it harder to pay, and the consequences of non-payment are more severe. The surge in filings signals stress not just in individual households but in the entire suburban governance model that depends on predictable revenue streams. And finally, helicopter parenting has entered the workplace. Mom and dad aren't just helping with resumes anymore. They're calling hiring managers, applying for jobs on their adult children's behalf, and even lurking just off-screen during Zoom meetings. What started as the occasional parent ride-along to a job interview has become full-on career co-piloting. Employers report parents negotiating offers, attending onboarding sessions, and intervening in performance reviews. It's a phenomenon that blurs the line between support and sabotage, well-intentioned, perhaps, but signaling to employers that the candidate may lack autonomy. For a generation raised on intensive parenting, the transition to professional independence is being mediated by the same hands that scheduled their playdates and edited their college essays. The workplace, it turns out, is just the next arena where the tether refuses to sever. That's your briefing for August 2nd. This edition of the 10-Point was curated and edited by Barbai Hazarika and Christina Roca. For more on any of these stories, visit WSJ.com or tap the headlines in your newsletter. I'm Emma Tucker, see you tomorrow.